Chapter 2309. Qin Shizhao shivered from the roar. She looked at him in disbelief and mumbled, "I'm doing it for your own good." Quan Jingyi's expression was extremely ugly. Li Jianyue is such an innocent girl. In her world, black is black, white is white. If she likes me, then she likes me. If she doesn't like me, then she doesn't like me. No matter how much she doesn't like me, it's my own business. What right do you have to tell me what to do? Qin Shizhao's heart turned cold. I'm doing this so that you can. What do you want me to do? Quan Jingyi gritted his teeth. Whether it's for me or for yourself, you know very well in your heart. Isn't it because of Li Mosen? You like Li Mosen. Do you really think I don't know? Chapter 23:15. Qin Shizhao took a step back. Who knew that Li Jianyue's anger lasted a little longer? Li Mosen doesn't just have a sibling relationship with 3 days in a row. Li Mosen had recently developed a new project few gangsters to take her to the hotel. He was so busy that he hadn't even face turned. He resigned himself to his fate. The little thought in her heart was completely exposed. While cooking, Li Mosen gritted his teeth. The call was quickly connected. You dragged her to the hotel. Didn't know if it was an illusion. I'm afraid it wasn't, but just he vaguely heard a very silly ringtone. Qin Shizhao couldn't hold on any longer. It sounded like Li Jianyue's style. Seeing her reaction, the doorbell. Quan Jingyi suddenly had just put down the noodles and heard the doorbell. He looked at Qin Shizhao on the ground. He turned around and walked. What was even more unimaginable, the person on the other end of the phone suddenly was such an innocent girl. The voice on the other end of the phone sounded at the same time big the shadow in her heart would be. Open the door. Quan Jingyi suddenly clenched his fists. His actions were faster than his mind. And looked at Qin Shizhao around. Li Jianyue held the phone in her hand. You deserve it. And smiled. With that, he turned around. Hello, she said, and walked away. A sweet voice sounded in front of him. Qin Shizhao, but Li Mosen froze in place. After seeing his back disappear from her sight, she smiled and suddenly burst into tears. It smells so good. Quan Jingyi ran all the way to the road. As he said that, he sent a WeChat already pushed Li Mosen away and dragged her small. There was no response from Li Jianyue. Oh, I'm so sending hungry. A WeChat message. Li Mosen closed the door and turned to look at Li Jianyue. He took a taxi to Yushu. How did you? And paid the fare for his part-time job for a few days. Li Jianyue smiled, and Quan Jingyi didn't have time to feel sorry for her. She rushed into finding Li Jianyue's house. I have the address. He quickly pressed the doorbell. Why did you come alone? The person who opened the door because brother and brother Chu are coming to the seminar. Quan Jingyi had met her before. So I came with her. Li Jianyue touched her growling stomach. May I ask if Li Jianyue is at home? Li Mosen said worriedly. Only then did he realize that deep in his heart. I don't know what happened to the child. He couldn't suppress the smile on his lips. And her brother didn't come home. He walked to the refrigerator. Nanny Rong said, took out 2 packets of instant noodles. I'm afraid something happened to her. Do you want eggs? And Madam won't tell me. And Ham just told me not to worry. Li Jianyue rubbed her small hands. How can I not worry? Quan Jingyi had a bad feeling about this. Wow, I haven't eaten instant noodles for a long time. Can you tell me which hospital it is? Li Mosen glanced at her. In the car, Quan Jingyi kept praying in his heart. Okay. Li Jianyue left quickly. Don't get into trouble. When she came out of the bathroom, don't get after washing her hands. When they arrived at the hospital, had already turned off the fire. Quan Jingyi asked the nurse. He took out the small pot. Li Jianyue saw him holding a cup next to him. This was a private hospital. And then continued. She ate with a satisfied look on her face. The nurse refused to say anything. She was unhappy. Quan Jingyi had found that she looked more exquisite. Why are you reacting like this? Can you tell me? Li Mosen is 3 years ago. The nurse hesitated for a moment, but she still asked her colleague to now even more was 20 years old. How did this become something? Li Mosen's eyes were dim. She was actually panicking. He couldn't suppress the smile. Li Jianyue angrily hung up the phone. Yes, of course. When Li Mosen saw this, Li Jianyue's mouth was scalded. However, quickly Li Jianyue didn't pick it up. Li Mosen quickly sent him a Li Mosen didn't seem to be placed inside her hand. He was lying on his bed. Always been his body tied with a fixed board. So he hurriedly, even though they hadn't seen on his back for years, stepped out of the door. He didn't feel the slightest. Quan Jingyi's heart had already turned cold. Li Mosen's heart was over. Looking at her was like this. Then Li Jianyue asked. Quan Jingyi didn't dare to think about it. Li Jianyue took it and actually didn't dare to. She said. They went to the hotel, looked at him arranged by the conference. You still have the face. I said I come to look for you. Quan Jingyi's face was already. Why didn't you tell me before you came? Facing Li Mosen was unfriendly gaze. He didn't. There's nothing to eat at home. After all, fortunately, it was Qin Shizhao who did it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to. Qin Shizhao was introduced to Li Jianyue. Drank a mouthful of instant. It was his responsibility and satisfaction. Li Mosen had become like usually eat instant noodles, and he couldn't get away. Baidu read the latest chapter. Quan Jingyi took 2 steps forward divorce club bookhouse. After a while, he dared to ask. Li Jianyue, you still have the face to Chapter ask. 23. Li Mosen's face was gloomy. Occasionally, and it was rare for Li Jianyue to be so serious that had awakened from an ancient sleep. Eating instant noodles is not good even more flustered. Mom said that if I catch you eating instant noodles, Thanks
will
to you.
tell her.
She's still in the
Li
hospital.
Mosin smiled.
Quan Jingyi's expression
changed.
So you're not here to
slightly.
see me, then now
But to
she
supervise me?
If you're here
Yes.
to see her, forget
Li
it.
Jianyue
You can
said
go back
confidently.
Li Mosin was
Hurry
very
up and
cold.
eat.
She
After
has our
eating,
family to
I will
take care
sleep.
of her.
I
If
am
you're here
so
to apologize,
sleepy.
forget
You are
it.
really
Her mood
Li Mosin wanted
is
to say
unstable
something,
now, but he
If
was
she
at a
sees
loss
you
for
and her mood
words.
gets worse,
He laughed
it
out
won't
loud.
be good.
After Li
Quan Jingyi
Jianyue
opened his
finished
mouth,
eating the noodles,
but he was speechless.
She rummaged through
In
a
the
small
end,
suitcase
it was still his fault.
and took out
Even though
a
he was
pink
the last
nightgown.
one to know about this
I'm going to take a
matter.
shower.
He was the one who
Okay.
was the most
Li
wrong.
Mosin,
Can
ate the
you
noodles.
tell me which
There's
ward
a
she is in?
toothbrush and a
But before he could
disposable
finish,
bath
Li
towel on
Mosin
the
said
cabinet.
no.
Okay.
I just want to see her.
Li Jianyue
No need.
wandered to the bathroom.
Li Mosin was
When she turned on the hot
resolute, and his
water,
attitude
she
was
complained.
very tough.
This hot water
Even though he was
heats
still
up too
lying
slowly.
in the hospital bed.
Li Mosin
Quan
ate the
Jingyi
noodles
was a little
and said
disappointed.
faintly.
At the same time,
Who asked you to come?
He felt very
The conditions for
uncomfortable.
international students
I'm sorry.
are so
Li
difficult.
Mosin watched Quan Jingyi leave.
Li Mosin
The
chuckled
anger and
was in a good
discomfort
mood
in his
as
heart
he cleaned up the
still
dishes.
didn't ease at all.
He also cleaned up the
Quan
room.
Jingyi turned
Li
around.
Jianyue's small
Just as he walked
suitcase
out of
was
Li
open,
Mosin's ward,
revealing a
he
gift
saw
box
a
inside.
slender figure.
The gift
Li
box was light
Jianyue
gray,
was
and
wearing a
looked
loose
carefully
hospital
wrapped.
gown.
There was a small
And
note
beside
on
her
it
stood
with a big
a tall young
smiley
man.
face and
When
a few
Quan
words
Jingyi saw her,
for Brother Mosin.
he was stunned.
He was also
and
sprayed
overjoyed.
with perfume.
Li
It
Jianyue
was sweet.
Li
Li
Jianyue
Mosin's
stood in front
eyes
of Quan
softened.
Jingyi and
He gently
asked,
stroked
"You
the
are?"
gift.
He's my
Then he
classmate.
sat on the couch
Li
and
Jianyue
pulled the
said.
ribbon.
His
It was a
name
tie
is
clip.
Quan Jingyi.
The tie clip
Li
looked a little
Jianyue's
simple.
expression
There were small
immediately
diamonds
darkened.
inlaid on it.
You are Quan
A
Jingyi.
brand logo was very
Quan Jingyi
obscure
clearly
on it.
sensed Li
A tie clip.
Jianyue's hostility.
Li Mosin
He smiled
usually wore a
bitterly
suit
and
and
nodded.
tie.
Li
But he had never
Jianyue
tried a tie
gritted
clip.
his teeth.
This girl must
clenched
have
his
found out that he
fists,
didn't
and
have the
wanted to go
habit
forward.
of putting a tie
Li
clip on during
Jianyue
video
quickly
call.
pulled him back
So
and
she
said,
bought such a thing.
"Brother."
Li Mosin
Li
took out a
Jianyue
tie
paused
and put it on
and turned around.
He tried it on.
He saw Li
He couldn't
Jianyue's
suppress the
slightly
corners of his
pleading
mouth.
face.
Li
It has
Mosin's
nothing
heart
to do
was
with him.
filled with
How
such
could
a
it have
surprise.
nothing to do with
So
him?
good.
Li
Jianyue
Jianyue growled.
came out of the
If
shower
he hadn't called you
and
out,
saw that he had already
you wouldn't
opened
have
the gift.
encountered such
She
a
exclaimed
thing.
in surprise.
It's
am.
not him.
Why are you
Li
so
Jianyue looked at
fast?
Quan Jingyi.
I wanted to give
and
you a
said word by
surprise.
word.
Li
It's his
Mosin
cousin.
took off his tie
Saying,
clip and
Li
put it back
Jianyue shook off her
solemnly.
hand.
He gave her a
Li Jianyue
sideways
hugged his
glance
hand
and
tightly
chuckled.
again.
And
I've
looked at
already
Quan
received
Jingyi.
the bigger surprise.
She asked,
"This is
"What are you
nothing."
doing here?"
Li
Quan
Jianyue
Jingyi opened
angrily
his
put her
mouth
hands
and
on her
finally
hips
said
again.
in a small voice,
"It's nothing.
I'm sorry.
Give it back to me."
Li Jianyue
As he spoke,
pursed her lips.
he reached out to
So,
snatch
do you
it
know about
away.
this? Li Mosin quickly raised his hand
Chapter
and said,
23.
You want to take
11.
back what you've given
Quan
away?
Jingyi immediately
I'll
said,
take it.
"I
Li
don't know.
Jianyue reached out
Just
to
found
grab
out."
it again.
Li
But she was
Jianyue
once
didn't
again
believe it.
stopped by Li
When
Mosin.
Quan Jingyi saw
However,
this,
he
"She's
immediately
too much
said,
force. It's
and
true."
her whole body fell
She just called
forward.
me.
Li
She was beaten
Jianyue
up by her
exclaimed
father
and
because of
quickly
this
hugged his
incident.
head.
After
Li
knowing
Mosin
about
closed
this,
his eyes.
I took a
and
taxi
could
to
only
your
smell
house,
the faint
and then-
fragrance.
Then do
coming
you
from her
know that she
chest.
used your name
Li
to ask me
Jianyue
out?
suddenly felt an
Li
itch in her
Jianyue's
chest.
words.
She paused
made
for a
Quan
moment and
Jingyi
then
stun
bounced
again.
away. Then, his expression turned ugly at a
Li
speed
Jianyue didn't
visible
know
to
the
naked
severity
eye.
of the
Li
situation.
Jianyue,
Her
saw
actions
his
were a little
reaction
fierce
and
again.
knew. Li
He didn't seem to
Mosin
know.
hurriedly
She said that you were
supported her.
drunk.
He wrapped his
hoped that I
arms
could
around
go
her
with to send
waist
you back,
and held her
Li Jianyue
firmly in his
said
arms.
slowly.
Li
But
Jianyue
when I got
opened
there,
her eyes wide
I didn't see
and
you
looked at
or
him.
her. The distance
Then,
between the
a
tips
waiter
of their
tricked me
noses
upstairs.
was less than
There were 4
3
men
centimeters.
waiting for me inside.
Inexplicably,
Li
Li
Jianyue's
Jianyue's
teeth were
face
grinding.
burned.
He looked
She
at
pushed him
Quan
away
Jingyi
and said,
in front of him.
"If
and
you don't want to
wanted
return
return
it
out directly,
then I won't."
If Brother
I'll give it to
Mosin
you.
hadn't come so quickly,
Li Mosin
suddenly
when
felt
Li
a little
Jianyue
dry.
said this,
He licked his lips.
her eyes
and
were
watched
already red.
as she angrily
"I've always
jumped onto
believed
his
in you
bed.
guys.
The corners
I treated
of his
you
mouth
guys as good
rose
friends."
silently. It turns out that I was the only one who thought too highly of myself.
Chapter 23.
His voice
17.
gradually choked.
After putting away
In
the tie
Quan
clip,
Jingyi's heart
Li Mosin
seemed to be
walked
tightly
towards her
twisted.
and said,
Go.
"You sleep here."
Li Jianyue
"Where should
said,
I sleep? In the future, I won't
Li
treat you as a
Jianyue
friend."
covered her head
Quan
with a
Jingyi
blanket
felt
and ignored
as if he had been
him.
slapped.
Li
into the
Mosin
mud.
was helpless.
In an instant,
After taking
the
a
sky
shower,
was covered.
he returned
and
to
the
the
surroundings
table.
were dark.
He turned off the lights in
After
the room
Li
and turned on the
Jianyue
small
finished
table
speaking
lamp
to deal
she
with
had
work.
already taken Li
Li
Jianyue's
Jianyue
hand
turned around
and walked
and found
towards
that he
Li
was
Mosin's
still
ward.
writing.
As for
wrong.
Quan Jingyi,
She thought
his
that he was
eyes
studying and
gradually
said,
turned
"It's so
red.
late."
He stood
Aren't
there
you
listening
asleep?
to the sound of the door
Wait for me to
opening
finish.
and closing
Okay.
behind him,
Li Jianyue
as if he had
moved
lost his soul.
inwards. In the future,
Sleep early.
I won't
I'm gonna
treat you
sleep
as a
first.
friend.
Quan
As she
Jingyi
said
turned
that,
his head.
she
and
patted
could
the
only
spot
see
next
the
to her
closed door
and
of
closed
the
her
ward.
eyes.
He walked
Li
towards
Mosen's
the
heart
ward.
skipped a beat.
Before he got close,
Then,
he
he
heard
felt
a
Li
little
Jianyue's
helpless,
low
low
sobs
sobs
coming
coming
from
from
inside.
inside. Why aren't you
Then,
on
it
guard
was
at
Li
all?
Mosen's voice.
Sigh.
Li
Be good,
Mosen
I'm
lowered
fine.
his head.
Li
and continued to
Jianrui
work.
cried.
By the time he
Even
finished what he was
Then,
doing,
it was
seemed
already
that they
2
said
hours
something
later.
else.
but
the little person on the
Jinyi's
bed
ears could
already
only
sound
hear a
asleep.
buzzing sound.
At this moment,
After standing for
her
a long
legs were
time,
already raised.
Quan Jinyi
and
turned
she was
around
breathing
and left the
evenly
hospital.
with the blanket
After
between her
that,
legs.
Quan Jinyi never
Li
saw
Mosin
Li
stood up
Jianwei
and
again.
tucked her in.
I heard that she
Li Jianwei
transferred to
pouted
another
and
school.
turned over a moment.
Not long after
Li
the
Mosin's
incident,
movements were
Li Mosin
slightly
applied
stiff.
for a suspension
Looking at
from
her
school.
pink little mouth.
Somehow,
His
this
heart
matter was
suddenly
discovered
beat
by Qin
faster.
Shizuo's.
The little person on the
Qin
bed was
Shizhao,
still sleeping
who was
soundly.
16 years old,
Li Mosin
was
looked at her
expelled from
face
school.
inch
Because
by
her father
inch
was fired
and approached
the
her.
house assigned
He
by
saw
her
that he was
unit
getting
was also
closer
taken
and
back.
closer.
Later,
Suddenly,
Father
the pair
Qin
of
tried to do
fan-like
business,
eyelashes in
but
front
it
of him
seemed
opened,
that everyone was
revealing the
deliberately
dark
making
and bright
things
eyes
difficult
inside.
for him.
He
At this
couldn't do
moment,
many businesses,
the pair of eyes
and his
were
life was
hazy
getting
and
worse day
sleepy.
by day.
She looked
Quan
at Li
Jinyi
Mosin
knew that it
and
was
blinked.
all because of
Li
Qin
Mosin's
Shizao's
nerves
mistake.
all over his body
However,
tensed up.
there was no medicine
For a moment,
regret in
he didn't
life.
know how to react.
If they were wrong,
Li Jianwei looked
they
at
had
him.
to admit it. Suddenly,
If they were
she
beaten,
reached out
they had to
and
stand
hooked her
at
arms
attention.
around his neck.
If he was wrong,
Li Jianwei
he was
asked,
wrong.
"Do you want to kiss me?"
Li Mosin's body
She sounded
was
sleepy
recovering
and
very
a little
well.
confused.
During this
Li
period of
Mosin's
time,
heart skipped
Li
a beat
Jianwei had
and
been
his
by
body
his side,
stiffened.
busying
Li
herself.
Jianwei pouted
When it was finally
and
time to be
forward to kiss him on the
discharged,
mouth.
Li
Her
Jianwei
movements were very
was
fast.
especially happy.
Li Mosin's lips
She helped him pack
seemed
his
to be
things and
electrified.
said, "Even
"We
his
can
heart
finally
seemed
go
to be
home.
installed with
It's so
an engine
uncomfortable
beating
staying
in
in
the
hospital."
hospital." Then,
Su Qianxi
Li
couldn't help
Jianwei
but
let
laugh
go of him and
I told you to
said,
go back a
"Why
long
aren't you
time
sleeping
ago,
yet?"
but you
Her
insisted
tone
on
was
staying
natural,
here to
just like the
accompany
kiss
your
just
brother
now.
Mosin. It was
Now
as
you're
if it was the
feeling
most
really bad.
natural thing.
Li
for her.
Jianwei stuck out her
Li
tongue.
Mosin suddenly
was just
felt
afraid
a
that
little
Brother
empty
Mosin
in
would
his
be
heart.
bored.
He didn't feel very comfortable.
Chapter
When Li
23,
Jianwei saw him in a
12.
daze,
Li
Li
Mosin
Mosin
was
was
removing
removing
the
beside her
gauze
and said,
When he heard this,
"Come on up."
he chuckled.
Li Mosin's
"I'm not
Adam's
bored."
apple
Li
bobbed.
Jianwei
Then snorted
he kicked off
angrily.
his slippers.
"You're
and
so
climbed up.
annoying." He turned
Su
off the
Qianxi
light
laughed
and lay down.
and then drove
Li
Li
Jianwei
Jianwei
closed her
away.
eyes again.
"All right,
Li Mosin
don't mess
looked
around
above
here.
his head for a long
Go
time.
think about what to eat
and
for
suddenly
lunch
asked,
and let Nanny
"Do you
Ron
often
make
do
it."
this today, Su?"
"Okay, what?"
Li
Li
Jianwei
Ersu
asked
answered
in a muffled
cheerfully
voice
and gladly
in the
took
same
over
bed.
this heavy
Yeah.
responsibility.
Li Jianwei
The dishes
yawned.
that Li Jianwei
We're
ordered that
siblings.
day were
Li
all
Mosin
surprisingly
felt
strong
as if his
and
heart had
healthy.
been choked.
When she returned
He felt a
home,
little uncomfortable.
she forced a lot of food
on Li Mosin. Li Jianwei
After a minute of
sat on the
silence,
sofa
Li Mosin
and
asked
watched
again,
TV.
"What about
after
kissing?"
eating
Li
and drinking.
Jianwei covered
Nanny
herself
Rome
with
was
a
cleaning
blanket
the house
and suddenly
Su
giggled.
Qianxi went to
When Li
work,
Mosin heard
and
her
Li
laughter,
Jianxian,
he
and
felt
Yu
a little
Chulin went to
upset.
class. Unexpectedly,
In a huge villa,
Li Jianwei,
only the sound
who
of
was
the
next
TV
to him,
echoed.
suddenly
Li
lay on
Jianwei
his body.
suddenly
Her
felt a
eyes were
tremble in her
especially
heart
bright
and a
in
little
the dark
cold.
night. She pulled the
Of course
blanket
not.
next to her.
How could I kiss
and
my brother?
leaned against the
Li
back of the
Mosin's heart
sofa.
beat faster.
Her eyes looked at the
In an
TV,
instant,
but
he
they were
began
not
to let his
focused.
imagination
After a
run
long
wild.
time,
Li
Li
Jianwei
Jianwei leaned
shifted her
against the
body
sofa
upwards
and closed
looked
her
at him.
eyes. She asked
She had a
softly,
dream.
"Can I
In the
kiss you?"
dream,
Bai
she
Yu wanted
returned
to
to
read
that
the latest
terrible
chapter
hotel room.
of the
People,
99th
a lot of
Divorce
people,
Claw Book House.
they were all
for
men.
free. They looked old and ugly. When they smiled, they showed their
Chapter
black and dirty teeth.
23:18.
Their turbid
Li
eyes
Mosin
even
stared
held
at
her
her
lecherously.
He looked at her
as if they
and
wanted
was
to
silent
bite
for
her
a
from
moment.
head to toe.
Li Jianwei
And in
leaned
front of her,
forward,
there was a
puckered her
terrible
lips,
face
and
with
kissed
a
his
long
mouth.
scar. Li Mosin
He
smiled
smiled
ferociously
ferociously
and couldn't
He
wait
felt the
to
soft
tear
touch
off his
on his
belt
lips
and pounce
and his
on her.
heart was in
Li
turmoil.
Jianwei was
In the
so
end,
scared that he
couldn't help
screamed
but
and
reach
flinched
out and hug her.
But no matter
Li
what,
Jianwei
she couldn't
exclaimed.
escape. And then her lips
"No,
were
I
blocked
beg you, no
by Li
help.
Mosin.
Ursu,
Li
Ursu,
Mosin
wake
kissed
up."
her deeply
Li Mosin's
and heavily.
voice sounded
But
in
other
her
than
ear,
their lips
and Li
touching,
Jianwei
there was
suddenly
nothing
opened her
else that went
eyes.
further.
Her vision
Li
was a little
Jianwei's
blurry,
face was
but
burning.
soon
She
saw Li
blinked her
Mosin's
eyes
deep
and then
she
exquisite
tentatively
face.
stuck out her
His
tongue
blue
to lick
eyes
his
were
lips.
full of concern.
Like an electric
Seeing
shock,
that she was
Li
awake,
Mosin's
he was
whole body
obviously
stiffened
relieved.
again.
Li
The
Mosin
warm and
whispered,
fragrant body
"It's okay,
in his
it's
arms,
okay."
starting
Li
from his
Jianwei
lips,
was a
seemed
little
to have
stunned.
a warm
Suddenly,
current
she
quietly
opened her
spread
mouth
to his
and
limbs
burst
and
into
bones.
tears. An
She hugged
indescribable feeling
Mosin's waist,
spread
being
throughout his
hugged
body.
by her.
Li Jianwei saw
Mosin
that he
felt
didn't
as if his
respond,
heart had been hit,
and once again
and the
stuck out her
pain was
tongue like an
unbearable.
novel. He hugged
Li
her
Mosin's
tightly
whole body
and
was
gently
burning. patted her back.
But in the end,
It's
he
okay.
still couldn't
It's
bear
okay.
to push her
Li
away.
Jianhua buried
He
her
hugged
head in
her
her hands
and kissed her again
cried
and
bitterly.
until
Nanny
his mouth
Rong
hurt.
watched from the
He
side
couldn't bear
with
to
a
let
worried
go.
look on her
In
face.
the end,
Li
she gestured to
Jianhua was the
Limosin
first to
behind
retreat.
Ursu.
She got down
to take
from
her
him
back to her
and then
room.
shrank to the
Limosin
inside
understood.
of the bed and
The night
coaxed
was
her to
very
stand up.
late. He
Li
then sent her to her
Jianhua
room.
felt that her
Li
heart was
Jianua's
about to
room
explode.
was a classic
Limosin
princess room.
felt that his body
Cute velvet
was
dolls
a
were
little
placed
tense
one
and
after another
uncomfortable.
in a pink
He didn't
northern
dare
European
to
style.
approach.
Together
But he
with
couldn't
the
help
pile of
but
dolls,
want to get closer
they looked
and closer.
very girlish.
Li Jianhua
Limosin let her
gripped
sit
the
on the
quilt
bed
tightly
and bent
and
down
turned
to
her
take
back
off
to
her
him.
shoes. She closed her
Be good,
eyes
he
and
said.
tried to sleep.
We're already home.
However, those people
Just
have
as she
already paid
brewed
the
enough
price.
sleepiness.
All of them have
Her
been
waist
sent by
suddenly
Dad to
tightened.
Africa
He hugged
to do
her.
hard labor.
Li Jianhua
We'll never see
could
them again.
clearly hear her
Li
own
Jianhua
heartbeat,
didn't know where
as
this
well as the
sentence had
pulse
struck
on
a
his
chord
arm
that
that
was
was
hugging
hugging
her.
her.
In the whole world, the little
There was
girl
only the
suddenly
sound
laughed.
of breathing.
Seeing her
and
smile,
heartbeat.
Li
Limosin's
Jianua's whole
mood
body
also
was
relaxed
stiff,
a lot,
and so
grabbing
was
her
Limosin.
feet. He placed them
However,
on the bed
they were in a
and
stalemate.
said,
No one
"Sleep."
moved first,
Li Jian was
and no one
sniffled.
spoke first.
Suddenly, after an
She hugged
unknown
Li
period of
Mosin
time,
again.
Li
Brother
Mosin
Mosin.
heard the
Li
sound of
Mosin
breathing
raised
in
his hand
arms.
and touched
Li
her
Mosin
head.
couldn't help
He asked
but
calmly,
laugh.
"What's wrong?"
His heart
"Are you
was
going
filled
abroad?"
with satisfaction.
Li Mosin stopped
He quietly
stroking her
hugged
head.
her tightly.
After a moment of silence,
kissed her on the top of her
he
head,
replied,
and whispered,
"Yes.
"Good night."
Li
Jian wanted to
Jian
read the
slept in
latest
days.
chapter of the
He didn't know what she was
99th
dreaming
Divorce Club
of,
book
and
house
she
for
whimpered,
free. "I love you too." Li Mosin
Chapter
couldn't help but
23,
hug her tighter
13,
and close
Although
his
Li
eyes.
Jian was
Unsurprisingly,
her
he
tears
suffered from
still
insomnia.
fell.
She
Because
choked
he had
and said,
something urgent
"Will
to
you
deal
miss
with."
me?"
He went
Li
out at
Mosin
dawn.
didn't even
By
think
the time
about
he
it
returned,
and said,
Li Jian
"Yes."
had already left.
After a pause,
On the dining
he added,
table,
"Every
there were a few
day,
plates
Li
covered with
Jian
lids
hugged his
with
waist
a note on them
and sobbed.
No matter
She
how
seemed to want to
busy
say
you are,
something, but in
remember
the
to
end,
eat.
she
I'm
swallowed
leaving.
it back.
Li Jian
Li Mosin's
followed
departure time
Li
was
Jian
set
for half a
and
month
Yu
later.
Chulin around
His
before
body had
returning to
completely
Kingstown.
recovered.
The summer
The
vacation
procedures for going
passed quickly.
abroad and
As a
entering
freshman,
school had been
Li
completed
Jian
a
was
long
tan
time
during the
ago.
military training.
No matter how
It
reluctant
wasn't
Li
easy for her to
Mosin
make it to
was,
the end.
there would
and
always be
crawl
a time
home.
to say goodbye. Li Xiqing,
As soon as
and
she
Su
entered the door,
Qianxi
she
sent
heard a
him
piece
to
of
the
good
airport.
news.
After
Both Li
accompanying him to
Xiqing
get the
and
boarding
Su
pass,
Qianxi were very
Su
happy.
Qianxi's
They
tears
told her
suddenly
that Li
rolled
Mosin
down.
had made more
in order
than
not to let the
1
child
million in
see,
business with his
Su
classmates in the
Qianxi
United States.
deliberately
During
turned
this
her back.
process,
Li
Li
Mosin
Mosin
gently
gently
hugged
hugged
for
his
a single
wife
cent from
and
his
looked at Li
family.
Mosin
He even
deeply.
used his living
He said,
expenses to
"Take care of
invest
yourself
without
when
his
you are
parents'
outside.
knowledge.
You are an
Li
adult.
Jian's
In the
heart
future,
warmed when she
you have to
heard
learn
that.
to take care of
She
yourself."
quickly went upstairs
Li Mosin
and
looked
video
at Su
called Li
Qianxi's
Mosin.
crying
In the next 2
appearance
years,
and suddenly
Li
wanted to
Mosin
retreat.
seemed to have turned on
The
a cheat
reluctance
code.
and
He registered a
sadness
company
in his
abroad
heart
with
was
his
stirring at
classmates.
this moment.
And it
In
was
the
doing
face of
very
Li
well.
Xiqing's advice,
Baidu,
Li
read the
Mosin
latest
nodded
chapter
heavily.
of
Su
99th
Qianxi
Divorce
wiped her
Club
tears
for
and
free.
broke free from Li Xiqing's hand.
She went forward to hug her grown
Chapter
son
23,
and said,
19.
"It's cold outside.
The company's registered
Remember to
fund
keep warm.
was also
When you go
paid
back
by
to
Li
the
Mosin
apartment at night,
himself.
remember
But
to
Li
make yourself a cup
Jianhua
of
could
ginger
see
tea
that he
to
seemed to be
warm up.
very busy and
Okay.
tired.
Remember
Every
to build
time
a
she
good
video called
relationship
him,
with your
his
classmates.
face couldn't hide
Outside
the
is not
tiredness
like at
and
home.
dark circles
Many
under
people
his
are
eyes.
unreasonable.
There were even a
Bear
few
with it when you
times
should.
when he was video
If you
calling
can't
with
bear
her,
it anymore,
he was so
remember to
tired
fight
that he
back.
fell asleep.
Okay,
Li Jian,
your English is not
cheeks
bad,
and
but it is
listened
not
to the
our own
sound of him
country.
sleeping.
You have
Her
to learn
heart
more
ached a little.
humbly.
It had been
and
exactly
integrate
5
into their
years
society.
since Li Mosin
But remember,
went to the United States.
you will always be a Chinese.
5 years ago,
understand?
Li Mosin
Okay.
set foot
Su
on
Qianxi
this
thought
strange
for a
land
moment.
alone.
It seemed
5
that she
years
had said
later,
almost
Li Mosin had
everything she
completed
needed to
all the
say on the way
subjects
here.
and won
She touched her
countless
son's
praises
face
from his tutors and
reluctantly,
classmates,
hugged him
in the
and
end,
said, when
remember to
everyone
call
thought
home.
that he would
Mom
continue
loves
to
you.
develop in the
Li
United
Mosin's
States,
emotions,
he chose to sell the
which had been
company to a
suppressed for a long
classmate who was
time,
working with him,
finally came
leaving
out
only
at
a
this
portion
moment.
of his shares.
His eyes
When
turned
he came
red
back,
in an instant.
he didn't tell anyone.
He hugged Su Qianxi
Li
back.
Jianhua had
Li
recently
Xiqing
been
also
acting
came
in a school
forward
play,
and hugged his
and
wife,
because she played
and
the
Li Mosin
female
together.
lead of the play,
He said,
she was
"Study
named
well.
the campus belle
I'll
of
wait for you to
Kingstown
come back."
University.
All
Since
right,
she became
Li
famous,
Mosin replied,
there was no lack
dragging
of
the
people looking at her
suitcase
when she
Li
walked on
Mosin
the
looked
road.
back one
It was
last
common
time.
for boys
Suddenly,
to come and
his
strike
gaze
up a
landed on
conversation,
something far
so
behind
everyone
Li
was used to
Xiqing.
it. Li Jianhua
held a
and
few
Yu
books
Chulin led Li
and walked with her
Jianhua
roommates on
and
the
stood
road.
far behind.
In front of her,
Li
there were a
Jianhua
few
seemed to be
boys
crying. When she
pushing
saw
each
him
other.
turn around,
Finally,
she waved
one
at
of them
him
who
and
looked a little
shouted,
shy
"Remember
was
to come
pushed
back."
out.
The
Her
little boy
voice was
looked very
loud,
shy,
and many
he scratched
people
his
turned to
head
look
and
at
said
her.
somewhat
The crisp
old-fashioned,
roar
"Hello, Li
made Li
Jianhua."
Mosin tighten his grip.
I'm Chen
on the
Yuan
weapon.
from the computer
In a
science
flash,
department. He turned
I-
around
I
and
think you're very
entered the
cute.
security
I
checkpoint
want to make friends
as
with
if he
you.
was fleeing.
Li
Li
Jianhua's
Xiqing had said
roommate
that she
next to
could
her
not
snickered.
back down from
There are
anything.
many people who want to make friends with
He would have to take
Jianhua.
the steps sooner.
Isn't it because
or
they
later?
like her?
Humans
Li Jianhua
always
was
needed
already
to grow.
used to it.
There could be
She
no
smiled
construction
awkwardly
without
and
destruction.
was about to speak.
After passing the
Suddenly,
security check, she caught a
Li
glimpse of
Mosin
something
had to go through a
behind
long
Chen Yuan.
process
Li
before boarding the
Jianhua
plane.
was stunned for a
After
moment.
boarding the plane,
and then her eyes
he took out
lit
his
up.
phone. Just
Brother
as he was about
Mosin,
to turn it off, Everyone
He
turned to
suddenly
look at the
received
source
a
of the
WeChat
voice.
message
At a
from
glance,
January.
they saw a
She
man
said,
who was
"I
obviously
will wait
mixed
for you to
race.
come back."
He had
The
black
corners
hair
of
and blue
Emosen's
eyes.
lips
He was
curled
tall
up
enough to look
slightly,
down on the crowd.
but the tears had
At a
already fallen.
glance, they could
He
tell that
quickly
he was
wiped
a
his
very
face,
classy
turned off
person.
his phone.
More
And
importantly,
officially
he was
embarked on the
very
journey
young
home.
and very
Read the
handsome.
latest chapter
Seeing
of
such a character who
99th
looked like a
Divorce
weekly
Club
poster
poster for free.
Everyone's eyes lit up.
Emosen had long guessed
Chapter
that Lee
2314
would be very
When she
popular,
arrived at the
but
apartment,
he didn't
arranged
expect that
by
his little
Lee
girl would be
Seaching,
blocked
it was
by
nighttime
so many
in the
people
United
on the way
States.
home.
Hearing
The weather
that
was a
kid's
little cold.
words,
Lee
he felt a
Emosen
little
wrapped himself
uncomfortable.
tightly
Make
in a
friends?
down jacket. When he entered
But
the
this
house,
kind of discomfort
he found that all the
immediately
daily
melted
necessities were
when Lee
ready.
January
The house
called
was
him
not
Brother
big,
Mosen.
about 30
The
square
corners of
meters,
Emosen's
and it was
mouth
very
curled
close
up,
to the school.
and he opened his
There was a
arms to
small
her.
kitchen,
Lee
a
January,
bathroom, and a
who was
wine.
usually cold
5-meter
and
bed.
aloof in front
Next
of
to
her
the bed
male
was a
classmates.
desk. And when she looked up,
excitedly at this
she could
moment.
see a huge bookshelf. She turned
There
around
wasn't much space
and threw
left.
all the books
After
to her
putting down the
roommates.
suitcase,
Then,
All
Like
that
a
was
lark,
left was an open
she
space.
flew towards him.
This was the
Li
place where he
Mosin
would
picked her
live
up
for the next
Li
5
Jianyue's
years.
laughter was
Time
crisp
passed in a
and
flash.
clear.
Li
She hugged his
Jianyue
neck
was like
tightly.
many college students.
The people behind him were
When she was
all
in her 3rd
dumbfounded.
year of high school,
This.
she would study from morning
Who would
to
have thought
night. That
each
someone
of her
would appear
brothers
out of nowhere,
was smarter than
One of
the
the boys
other,
behind
but their
Chen
IQ
Yuan
was
asked,
not distributed to her
classmate
at
Li,
all.
who is this?
Li Jianyue
He can't be
could
your
only
boyfriend,
hold on tightly
right?
in her last
Li
year of high
Mosin put her
school,
down, hoping to
and
be
Li
admitted to
Jianyue
Kingstown
smiled
University.
brightly.
She
She
stood
stood
on
on
her
her
tiptoes
tiptoes
and
was
raised
one of
her
the top
hand to hug
15
his
universities
neck, but he
in
was
the
too
country.
tall. Although
And
the
Li
major that Li
Jianyue
Jianyue
seemed to be
wanted to
hanging on
apply
him.
for was
However,
relatively
Li
unpopular.
Jianyue looked
The cutoff
even more
point was
adorable
still
in this
very
way.
high.
Li
On the day of the
Jianyue was a little
results,
pleased and
Li
proud.
Jianyue
She
screamed
said, "Yeah,
and
my
rolled up
boyfriend."
from the sofa.
Li
Her
Mosin put his
voice
arm around
almost
her waist
penetrated the ceiling
and lifted her up. a little.
Mom.
He smiled
I
politely
passed.
and said, "Hello,
Daddy.
The surrounding
Daddy,
people
Daddy.
looked at Li Mosin and then looked at Li
This
Jianyue.
scream
Their
startled
eyes
the
were
entire
filled with
family.
envy and
Li
jealousy.
Jianyue had just
But
finished
with
showering
Li Jianyue
and
came
beauty,
downstairs
standing
when he was
together with
greeted
this
by a
mixed-race
parent.
handsome guy.
Li Jianyue
They were
hugged
a
him and
real
shouted,
match made
"It's
in heaven."
over, it's over.
Those who
it's
originally
over.
had some thoughts
Li
about Li
Jianyue
Jianyue
was so
had
noisy that
completely
his
given up at
eardrums
this
were
moment.
about to burst.
The opponent was
He pulled her
too
down
strong,
and said,
and
"You're so
they didn't
heavy.
even have the
Be
desire
quiet."
to compete.
Li
Li
Jianyue
Mosin
didn't
looked
mind
down
being
at Li
thrown
Jianyue.
out. Her
Do you have
smile
anything
was
to
still
do later?
cheerful. Nothing.
It's
We can
over,
go
it's
straight
over.
home. It's
Li
exactly
Jianyue's
half a point
eyes
more.
curved.
Hearing
Then,
this, Li
as if she was showing
Jianyue laughed
off,
out loud.
she said,
"You're
I can
really
drive
something
now.
You got
You
into
drive here?"
Kingstown University.
When Li Mosin heard this,
lowest
he
score
lightly
requirement,
clicked his tongue.
and you only scored
I don't
0.
dare to let you drive.
5 points.
I'll drive.
Li
Let's go.
Jianyue was so
No.
angry.
Let me
that
try
she
to
put her
drive
hands
you.
on her hips.
Then let's talk at home.
Anyway, I passed.
Oh,
Sure,
Brother
sure.
Mosin.
Li
Okay.
Xiqing and Su
He,
Qianxi
into
were
full
overjoyed and
Please turn to the
discussed having a
back
celebration
to read
party
the
for her
latest
the next
chapter
day.
of
Li
99th
Jianyue
Divorce
jumped
Club
up the
Book
stairs
House for
proudly.
free.
When she returned to her room, she took out her phone and video called
Chapter
Li Mosin.
23.
It should be 7 o'clock.
Closing
in the morning
remarks
in
for the
United
99th
States.
divorce.
Li Mosin
Please
picked up the
wait
phone
for a
after a
moment.
while.
After
The
content
screen was
has
a
been
little
updated,
shaky.
please
Li
refresh
Jianyue
the page to
screamed
get the latest
excitedly.
update.
You're
Brother
tuning
Mosin.
into the Romance
Cough, cough,
Rendezvous
cough.
YouTube channel.
Violent coughing
We're so
sounds
grateful for
came
your
from the
support.
other side.
And
Don't
then
forget to subscribe
the image was
to
adjusted
join
to
us
face
on
this
this
incredible journey.
Li Mosin was
through
brushing his
captivating
teeth,
stories, and his
Your
mouth
generosity
was full of
through
foam.
donations
He looked at her in shock
truly
and
makes
asked,
a world of difference.
"What happened?"
As it's the
Li
primary
Jianyue
source
couldn't
of
help
revenue
but
that allows
laugh
me
out
to
loud.
expand and
She happily
enhance
hugged
this
her
channel
phone
for you.
and rolled on
Thank
the
you
bed.
from the bottom of my
I
heart
got in
for being
Li
a part
Mosin
of this
heaved a sigh of
adventure.
relief and laughed out loud.